So, set the scene for me, David. It's 1775. The American Revolution has just started on the East Coast. What had happened recently in the San Diego region?
It was a few years before in 1769 that the Spanish first arrived in a permanent way. They'd been here very briefly with Cabrillo in 1542, but 1769 is the first permanent Spanish settlement. And so you would have had above what is now Old Town and the Presidio Hill, the establishment of the Presidio, and the mission had moved to its present location up in Mission Valley. It was a mix of Spanish soldiers and civil officials, and then over at the mission, a couple of padres, friars, and then, of course, a mix of the native Kumeyaay people, some who lived around the Presidio, some who lived at the mission, and the vast majority who lived out in sort of their traditional villages and towns around the county.
So in 1775, on the East Coast, the people living in the colonies were waging war against the British for independence. Indigenous people in the San Diego region were getting started on their own revolt. Tell me about that.
Yes. So at almost the exact same time, in 1775, November of 1775, the Kumeyaay, specifically the Kumeyaay that live south of the San Diego River, the Teepai, they organized a revolt against the presence of the Spanish. And so November 4th and 5th, they sent soldiers, warriors, to surround the Presidio and occupy the Spanish soldiers, sort of keep them at bay, while another contingent went over to the mission itself and actually attacked the mission, burned it down, dragged one of the fathers, Father Jaime, out down to the San Diego River where they murdered him. But this was all in the big picture, a response to Spanish colonial presence in San Diego. And so the Kumeyaay were, not to draw too many parallels, it's certainly different, but while the Americans are responding in their own way to English colonial realities, the Kumeyaay were responding to the Spanish colonial realities.
What's the connection between the French and Indian War, the American Revolution, the Kumeyaay Revolt, and the founding of San Diego?
The result of it was that essentially Britain was ascendant in North America, and the French left for the most part. And it set the conditions that would eventually lead to the American Revolution, specifically issues about land, the presence of British troops, and taxes. At the exact same time, it sets the conditions for what's going to become the establishment of San Diego. Remember, the Spanish had been here in 1542 but left. There was no permanent Spanish settlement here in San Diego. But as a result of the war and the reshuffling of global powers, the Spanish realized we need to have a stronger claim on our lands in Alta California in case the British get any ideas.
What is your sense about what people on the East Coast knew about what was happening here in San Diego at the time?
You know, I suspect not much, just given distances and times and the ability to get information across those distances. But what's interesting is the other direction. Many of the people in San Diego were aware of what was happening. So the Spanish soldiers at the Presidio collected money and funds to donate to the Spanish military that were then used in the Spanish alliance with the Americans against the British.
I've worked as a reporter in San Diego for a very long time now, and what's always stood out for me is anytime there is a big national story, there's always a San Diego connection. And what you've just recited to me about local history basically tells me that that tie has existed for some time now, right?
Yes, absolutely. San Diego is just as old as the United States, certainly in European history. Obviously, it's older in terms of Native Americans. What you see is a lot of the things that are happening on the East Coast that we take to be fundamentally part of American history, U.S. history, are shaping events here in San Diego, and that they're happening in some cases simultaneously. So San Diego history is unique, but it is always connected to these broader national and global histories.